Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder how teenagers are using that super fast AI you hear so much about, and what it is doing to their development? Well, this new study dives deep into that very question, looking at what we know so far about teens and generative AI. This is a massive review that looked at tons of studies, all about how teenagers are using AI, especially those new chatbots, like tools like ChatGPT. Think of it like a big science detective mission trying to piece together what we know about this new frontier. The researchers noticed something pretty wild. Generative AI, like the kind that can write stories or create art, is spreading faster than anything we've ever seen before. And guess who is right there on the front lines? Teenagers. They're some of the earliest and most active users. Now, why study teenagers specifically when it comes to AI? Well, adolescence is a super important time. It is like a training ground for life where they're figuring out who they are, building relationships, and learning all sorts of new skills. The way they interact with technology during this time can really shape their future. AI tools are different from, say, social media. They can be like a 24/7 tutor, a creative partner, or even a fake friend. This is especially interesting for teens because they're at a stage where they're naturally exploring new things and forming their identities. But these cool new tools also come with new questions and potential risks for young people. So the main goal of this huge review was to gather all the scientific studies from the last few years about how teens are using AI. They wanted to see what questions researchers are asking, what they're finding, and importantly, what we don't know yet. How did they do it? They followed a very careful step-by-step process. They searched major scientific databases for research papers. They had very specific rules for which studies to include, making sure the participants were teens, and that the studies were about generative AI, not just any old computer program. They screened thousands of papers to end up with the ones that really mattered. Once they had their list of studies, they dug into each one. They meticulously pulled out information about who was studied, what kind of AI they used, what the researchers were trying to find out, and what the main results were. It's like building a giant puzzle, putting all the pieces of information from different studies together. They started with a huge number of potential papers, over 30,000. After all their careful filtering, they ended up with 82 studies that really fit their criteria. That's still a lot of research, but it shows how much information they had to sort through to get to the core findings. So, what did they find when they looked at all these studies? The most common topics researchers were interested in were how teens felt about AI, how they were using it for school, and how often they were using it. It is like everyone's trying to figure out if teens like AI, if they're using it for homework, and how much. What's surprising is what wasn't studied as much. Topics like how AI affects teen friendships, their thoughts about future jobs, whether they're becoming too dependent on AI, or even how it impacts their mental health and well-being were studied much less. There is a real gap in understanding these crucial areas. One of the biggest takeaways is that the research is all over the place. There aren't many solid, consistent answers yet. It's like looking at a bunch of pieces of a puzzle that don't quite fit together perfectly. In school settings, some studies found that using AI actually helped learning, but others showed that relying too much on AI could hurt kids' thinking skills. It seems like how teens use AI for school really matters. When researchers talked to students directly, they often felt mixed feelings. They saw the benefits, like getting things done faster, but they also worried about becoming lazy, not thinking for themselves, and not knowing the rules about using AI in school. They really wanted more guidance from adults. The studies that did look at social and emotional effects were few but important. One found that teens who were happier with AI chatbots also worried more about losing human connection. Another study even showed that teens who used AI more often felt lonelier. And here is a really interesting point. One study looked at teens over time and found that if kids already had mental health issues, they were more likely to become dependent on AI. It wasn't the other way around. This suggests that AI might be something teens turn to when they're struggling, rather than something that causes them to struggle. The researchers stressed that these social and emotional parts of AI use are super important for how teens grow up, and we need way more research here. Now, let's talk about how they studied this. Most studies were like taking a snapshot in time, asking teens about their AI use and feelings right then. These are called cross-sectional studies. They're good for seeing what is happening, but they can't tell us if AI causes things. What is really missing are studies that follow teens over a long time, or experiments where you can compare groups. Another big challenge is that scientists aren't even measuring AI use the same way. It's like everyone is using a different ruler. This makes it really hard to compare findings from one study to another. A huge chunk of the research, nearly 2/3, came from Asia. mostly China. This means we have a lot of information about how teens in certain parts of the world use AI, but we know much less about teens in other places like Europe, North America, or other parts of the globe. And where are they finding these teens? Mostly in schools. This makes sense, as schools are a primary place for learning and interaction. They did study a range of teens, from younger adolescents up to those in their late teens and early 20s, but the biggest focus was on those in middle and high school, which makes sense as this is a key developmental period. Interestingly, most of these studies were published in journals that anyone can read for free. This is great for getting information out quickly to parents, teachers, and the public. A concerning finding is that less than half of the studies even bothered to define what they meant by AI. This, along with the inconsistent measurement, really muddies the waters and makes it hard to understand exactly what the research is telling us. So, what is the big picture here? This review basically tells us that the science of teens and AI is still super new. Like a baby field, we have a lot of research coming in fast, but it's mostly focused on a few topics like school and general attitudes. It's not giving us the full story of how AI is actually impacting teens' lives in all the different ways they use it, from how they feel to how they relate to others. As we mentioned, there is no clear agreement on most things. It's hard to draw firm conclusions when studies are giving us such different results. However, there are some clear patterns. When AI is seen as helpful and easy to use, teens are more likely to use it. This is really useful information for people designing AI tools, or for parents and teachers who want to understand why their kids might be drawn to it. But the researchers also give a strong warning. Just because teens adopt AI doesn't mean it is automatically good for them. We need to think critically about it and have adults help guide its use so it doesn't get in the way of important development. They also touched on AI literacy, basically how much kids understand about AI. It seems like knowing more about AI is generally a good thing for well-being in school. But again, how we measure that literacy is all over the place. This is a crucial point. We know very little about how AI affects teens' mental health and their social lives. This is a huge blind spot. The few studies that did look at this suggested some potential downsides, like AI dependence being linked to poorer mental health and more phone problems. There is a lot of buzz and worry about teens using AI as a buddy, especially if it leads to bad mental health outcomes. The researchers point out that while this is a big public concern, actually doing the scientific research to prove these connections is still just getting started. The way the research is done, the methods used also shows that this is a very new field. Most studies are like quick checks, not deep dives over time. The common methods like surveys are good for getting a general idea and hearing directly from teens, but they have limits. Asking people what they do can be inaccurate, and just seeing a connection doesn't mean one thing causes the other. They really need more studies that track changes over time and set up experiments to get clearer answers. They also suggest we should stop just talking about screen time and start looking at how teens are specifically using AI, just like researchers did with social media. They even mentioned things like tracking phone data, with permission of course, to get more objective information instead of just relying on what people say they do. The imbalance in where the research is done is a big deal. If most of our information comes from one region, we might be missing out on how AI affects teens in different cultures and societies. The speed of publication is mind-blowing. Most of these papers came out in 2025, with hardly any research before 2023. This really shows how quickly this field is exploding, mostly thanks to tools like ChatGPT becoming widely available. An interesting point they make is about AI helping with research itself. This sounds helpful, but they point out that AI can sometimes make up facts or citations. This can make it harder to trust even published research, especially when studies have had to correct things that looked like AI-generated mistakes. It's a reminder that we always need to be critical. So, what's next for research on teens and AI? The biggest need is to get scientists on the same page. They need to agree on what terms mean, how to measure things consistently, and come up with better tools and methods for studying AI. They really need to be super clear about what AI is and what it can actually do. And they need to focus on the specific ways teens are using AI that are most important to study. One great idea they have is to actually involve young people in deciding what researchers should focus on. The researchers also say we need new theories that really explain why AI is different and how it impacts teens uniquely, not just using old ideas about how people interact with media. Because talking to an AI is not the same as talking to a friend. They emphasize that we need to look beyond just school and think about the whole picture of teen development, things like identity, friendships, and mental health. And importantly, we need research from all over the world with diverse groups of teens. So even though teens are using AI for fun, for support, and for advice, we barely know what that's doing to their development. This is a massive gap. To understand if AI is causing short-term fads or long-term changes in teens, we absolutely need studies that follow them for years. And a really important point is that this research is spread across different fields like psychology, education, and computer science. They need to work together more closely, like a big team, to really understand the complex world of teens and AI. So, what's my takeaway from all this? This review is a crucial first step in understanding how this incredibly fast-moving technology is shaping young lives. It clearly shows us what we know, but more importantly, it highlights the huge gaps in our knowledge, especially around the social and emotional impacts. It's exciting that so much research is happening, but we desperately need more systematic, diverse, and long-term studies to really get a handle on how generative AI is changing the adolescent experience. What do you think? Are you a teen using AI? How has it impacted your life? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science explained, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.